please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Mark. Okay, there are copies of our agenda on the side table, as well as our public comment policy. Our agenda is a little bit different tonight because we have two presentations, and we have presenters who are from out of town, so we're going to look at those things up front. First item we have is the approval of minutes from July 12th.
Move we dispense with the reading.
Okay, a motion has been made to dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's going to carry.
Move we accept them as presented.
Okay, a motion has been made to accept the minutes as presented. Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's going to carry. Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce, is it Jesse Stowell?
Yep.
Who is going to be doing a presentation. He is from Encore Renewable Energy. And I think I'm just going to do a quick round robin so you know who is sitting at the table here. Gail, I'll let you start.
Gail Hoffman, Town Clerk.
George Senek, Supervisor.
Barbara Dell, Councilwoman.
Duck Miles, Councilman.
Mike Miles, Councilman.
Gilda Ward, Councilwoman.
Okay. And Jesse, I'm going to give you the floor, and we're going to, a little bit later, open this up to some questions and answers.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, George. Here's, I have 4 printouts, which is a little bit short, unfortunately, but it's better than none, I guess. Thanks a lot for your time. I'm here down from Vermont to talk about the possibility of working with the town on a solar project where we would lease town-owned land and develop a community-scale solar project. Just wanted to give you a quick background on our company and then talk about what a potential project could look like and how it could benefit the town. We were founded in 2007 in Burlington, Vermont. Since then we've developed almost 50 solar projects so far, all in Vermont. We have other projects in New York and Connecticut under development, but they're not built yet. We've done originally our company was really focused on brownfields, landfills, and we've still done a lot of solar projects on those types of sites. We've also done a number of projects just on kind of green fields or ag fields, and some rooftop, but mainly kind of community scale, 1 to 5 megawatt projects, ground mount. That's kind of been our sweet spot. We, like I said, we've done about 16 megawatts since our founding. We're starting to expand outside of our home state, which is why I'm here tonight. And we're also a certified B Corporation, which is a relatively new designation that speaks to our triple bottom line, where we have a desire and company goals to make sure that projects that we work on benefit the world in environmental, social, and financial for all parties involved. It's basically, you can look online for B Corporation. It's kind of a new movement, but the general idea is that business should be a force for good. So that's something we take really seriously and try to operate within its mandate and goals within that. So there's two sort of just kind of diving into the 2 potential projects based on the land that's right behind us and over there. I looked at a 2 megawatt scenario and then also a 4.3 megawatt, sort of maximizing the space available. The 2 megawatt is the standard size program in New York based on the New York state policy for community scale distributed generation solar projects. That would occupy around plus or minus 11, might be 12 acres of land. We would interconnect right to the NYSEG distribution grid that's already here. And the power would go into the grid, but it would also generate essentially net metering credits. And those, we would most likely work to sell those to as a community solar project. So it could be anybody in the NYSEG zone. So it could be members of the town that live here, or neighboring towns that are also within the same, has to be the same utility and the same load zone. Same with the larger project. There's talk that the program that now is capped at 2 megawatts might expand up to possibly even 5 megawatts. Essentially, our interest would be shared there as far as bringing a larger project, which would have more benefit to the town in the form of lease payment. And it'd be a similar scenario as far as where the power would go. It would just be a larger project enabled by a change. And that could happen within the next year or two. The time frame for these projects are usually driven by the utilities interconnection process, which is pretty slow in New York. So I would expect at this point, building next summer is probably a stretch. Realistically, it would probably take 18 to 24 months to finalize a project of this size. And then if you look at the lease terms, I mean, what we put together here is a lease rate of $1,200 per acre per year. And it does add up over time. These are long-term projects, so a 25-year lease at least. And we would, of course, take all the development risk, the ownership risk, and payments would start as soon as we, brought the project to commercial operation. There's also another major benefit, which we haven't quantified here, just because that's in the form of property tax revenue. I was just talking with George earlier. There's a calculator and a toolbox, I guess, from NYSERDA, from the state, that helps counties and municipalities calculate what a pilot payment would look like. And so we would expect to work with you guys on that, and obviously should be a net benefit for sure as far as the tax revenue would also be a benefit to the town. So, and then finally, there could be, we'd be happy to work with the town on their electric bill to offset the electric bill for the town. So there could be the benefit from the lease payment, the property tax revenue or payment in lieu of taxes, and then you don't spend a ton of money, I guess, on electricity, but we could also sell you guys the net metering credits at a discount to their value, so you have kind of locked in savings on the electricity bill as well. So I want to make sure I address any of your questions. Generally speaking, what I'm hoping for is that the board would approve, the negotiation of a lease contract with Encore, and then we could, once we had the contract in place, which would be essentially a lease option, then we could, in earnest, start the development where we need to. During the option period, we would do all the development, which would include interconnection applications, engineering design, permits, things like that. All that would be kind of at our risk, at our cost. And then once all those things came together and we're ready to start building, then we would exercise that option, which would start the lease payment in the long-term lease. So, I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
Go ahead,
I have a question right off the bat.
I've seen several of these, and I have absolutely no issue with them from what I've seen. But to ask you a question is, who's going to maintain
Right. That's my question.
the ground? Who's going to do the groundwork? Who's
Sure.
who's going to take care of the mowing? Because I really don't want anybody in there running around in high voltage.
Right. No, yeah. So we would fence it, so there wouldn't be anybody in there, and then we would mow probably twice a year. Essentially, the way these get financed is we have to make sure that we capture the federal tax credit. And so there would be tax equity that would be brought in, and whoever owns the project would also be responsible for the operation and maintenance. A lot of times, normally that's us. And so we would most likely subcontract to a local mowing shop to make sure that they were mowed. If the grass grows too high, it starts to shade out the panels, so.
And it will grow here.
Yeah. You guys can grow grass, right?
Place
Yeah.
here won't do it.
What about snow?
Snow,
In the winter time?
Yep, yeah, well, we have a lot of experience with that in Vermont. Generally speaking, solar production is not as good in the winter, so it's not quite as big an issue, but there is some sun in the winter, and the snow generally sheds off. Sometimes you do lose a little production from like a sticky snow or some kind of a freeze thaw thing, but they're generally designed to shed snow so that they're tilted and they're 3 or 4 feet off the ground, and snow kind of
So
falls
normally
off.
there's no problem having to remove them physically from the collectors.
Like removing the snow. We've done that a little bit, but it usually doesn't. It's usually not worth it to go out and sweep. It's a trade-off, essentially
Just
with
a
the
question.
trade-off of.
As long as I don't have to do it.
No, I mean, as the landowner, all you would do is
Last winter, I don't like it.
just own the land.
Okay.
So we're not
What we had last
responsible for
year,
keeping that
never-
open?
No, you wouldn't be responsible for anything having to do with the equipment, nothing with the operational risks or anything like that. That would all be on the project owner, who would be motivated to keep everything in good repair, because that's how they make money, is to keep the system operating so that the revenue can come into the project.
Now, are you basically a builder, or does your company continue to maintain and operate the systems, or have you sold the systems that you've put in?
Right, so we've owned some projects that we've built, and others we've essentially sold. We would own them all, but the only way that we can capture the federal tax credit is to bring in outside financing, and that essentially means they have to be a majority owner at commissioning so that they can actually realize the tax credits.
What about decommissioning? Let's say we get 25, 30 years down the line.
Yep.
Now, how is that handled? And I'm assuming, we're not gonna pay for it.
No, yeah. So that would be handled in the lease document. We would definitely have a decommissioning terms in there. The project owner is responsible for it.
Do they generally escrow money, or do they have a bond, or?
We have some flexibility there. I mean, my personal opinion is that these are gonna be assets that are generating power and fully paid for, and there's gonna be great value in them still. Worst case, the scrap value would more than offset the cost of pulling them out of the ground. But if the town wants, some sort of decommissioning fund, we'd be willing to negotiate that for sure.
Did you say that was our responsibility, the landowner responsibility?
No, the owner, as part of the lease, would remove the system at the end of the lease term.
Okay.
In the
that would be
contract.
your responsibility then.
Yep.
That needs to be in the contract.
Are there other board
Yeah,
questions?
what happens if, I've read some horror stories about some of these down south
Oh, yeah.
that have folded
Mhm.
and walked away and left the project sitting there. I've seen one, that's what I'm
Sure.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, they're companies definitely go out of business all the time. I know there's a nuclear station in the south too, there were the companies in bankruptcy. Generally speaking, this is, once it's operational, which it doesn't take too long to build. Once we get it through the permitting process, it's probably 2 months or 3 months to build it. But once it's operational, it's a revenue producing asset. So if a company that owned it is starting to go out of business or goes bankrupt, then its assets will be sold to other companies. Then, the lease could also include terms if if there's a certain amount of time after the company went bankrupt, I guess, then we could have some kind of protection for you guys. I mean, I really don't think there's any risk there, because what's going to happen is a revenue producing asset will be sold to another company so that the bankrupt company can.
Well, I've seen the one in particular, it's near where my sister lives,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's growing up with weeds and
It's not
just-
producing any energy.
hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah, sure
In
is.
North Carolina. They walked away, now
There's
it's the
been other
landowner's
situations
problem.
like that too.
Yeah.
Other
Oh, really?
places.
That's what worries me.
Huh.
Okay. If the board is all right, can we open this up
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
the
Sure.
people here? And, I know there are cards over there, we really wasn't set up for public comment, but if there are questions, if we can go one at a time and limit you to about 5 minutes. Anybody have questions for Mr. Stowell here? Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there an advantage to the consumers of the product? Will they get their electric at a discount? And if so, and also I was wondering about local investment into the project. Do you get involved in things like that?
Sure, yeah, we'd be open for sure to local investment. And yes, the end user, I guess, the receiver of the credits that are generated will receive those credits they'll pay less than they're worth. So if the credits are worth $1, they'll pay probably 85 cents, something like that.
I'm talking about the person that opts to buy the electric that you are selling.
Right, so the kilowatt hours will be sold at a savings for the buyer of the kilowatt hours.
Compared to other sources, but of course
Right.
it floats with the market.
Right, I mean, there's kind of two ways you can do it. You can do a floating rate that floats with the market, or we'd also be willing to lock in at a given rate. Could be some risk that the market rates could go up or down, and then a lot of times people are more comfortable with a fixed percentage discount,
I see.
so they're not at the risk of the
There was another
market.
local project that was offering to pay 10 or 15%
Yep.
off the current rate.
Yep,
So there was an advantage to those people that would choose you as the electric company they want to deal with.
yeah, and they still would receive, just to be really clear, we wouldn't be an electric company, we're just selling the net metering credits. They would still be tied to the grid and have reliable power from NYSEG, et cetera.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's a pretty great deal. I'm a member of a community solar project. I put no money down and I save, 25% actually, because I got in kind of early up in Vermont, but.
Now, how do you market the community solar aspect of this? How is it marketed?
Yeah, good question. It's a pretty retail kind of scenario. It'd be a campaign that we would start on probably 2 or 3 months before the project started construction. Just because consumers aren't really used to the 18-month permitting time that developers are used to. But once we had all that in place and we knew we were about to break ground, then we'd start a big campaign, which would, go out there. We definitely would start with this town, be the easiest place.
How many consumers would be involved, let's say with the 2 megawatt project? And
Boy,
I
good
grant-
question. I have to do a little quick math there. It would be like probably 300 or 400, something like that. I have to double check that. That's
Okay.
kind of on the
All
fly,
right,
but
good to
yeah,
know.
it's on the order of in the hundreds.
Okay. Any other questions from
I have a
the floor?
question. I was 5 minutes late because my neighbor's heifers got out. It wasn't Mark. It was Bill Lowell. So I've heard and have done a little research that some of the materials for the solar are improving tremendously. Now, some of the early ones that go in to dispose of them could be, more difficult, more costly. But as technology improves, and I don't know what yours are, at the end of that 25, 30 years, there may not be a disposal problem as far as having to pay, like some houses have asbestos and things like that. this is not necessarily with some of the newer technology. I don't know what your technology is for the solar panels.
Yeah, we're pretty technology agnostic. I mean, solar modules are pretty commoditized as far as.
How long have you been in business?
We've been in business for 8 years. Oh no, God, it's 2010,
2007.
almost 10 years, yeah.
Okay. So you plan to stay in business?
Oh, well,
Well,
tell my wife we plan to stay in business, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So as far as the modules themselves, I mean, there's really sort of two main technologies. There's the crystalline technology, which is what you see almost everywhere. And then there's also thin film technology, which is,
yeah, that's what I heard about.
it's kind of what your calculators have, but there's also some companies that make big solar panels out of that. They're
Where
both,
are they made? Where are your panels made?
we don't actually have panels, but like I said, we're most of the panels that we use are produced in Korea or other offshore, some in Mexico. I mean, there's about enough U.S. manufacturing for about 2% of the market. So it's a very commoditized kind of international global supply chain for modules. I wish there was more U.S. manufacturing, but as far as the material is not toxic. It's very inert. The panels themselves have a standard 25-year warranty. My personal opinion is that they'll last much longer than that, and the system would probably just keep producing power, because once it's producing power, why take it down?
Okay, anyone else from the floor? Okay.
If anyone else is, how big is the panel and what's the wattage per panel?
They're generally speaking, they're about 2.5 feet wide and about 5 feet long, and they're on the order of 300 or 400 watts each rated power.
I have them on my roof. I have 330 of that size.
Yep.
And I will share with others my electric bill is 0, and I sell back 30% of what I produce. So it's not
Cool.
as cloudy as people say it is in Shenango County.
Yep. Yeah, it's not about, there's sunshine everywhere. It's just about kind of having the right program to make it work. Yep.
Just one other question. How dependent is the project on continuation of tax credits that exist?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's dependent on the federal tax credit for sure. The federal tax credit after 2019 will begin to sunset. So right now it's a 30% tax credit through the end of 2019. Then in 2020 it's I think 26%. 2021 it goes down again. I don't forget that number. So it continues to shrink down over the next I think 4 or 5 years after 2019. And so basically the project economics will start to be impacted for sure. We'll have to it's a little hard to predict exactly how much so at that point, but
Now, have you done other community solar projects with municipalities?
we have. We just wrapped up it's actually hasn't been built yet, but we just finished the permitting on a 5 megawatt project on a landfill owned by the solid waste district in Windham County, which is where Brattleboro, Vermont is.
Yeah, I'd be interested if you could give us some of the municipalities' names and so we can contact them.
You have nothing in New York.
We don't have anything built yet, no. But we have a phenomenal set of references that I'd be happy to provide. We've done really good work in Vermont. So.
What about farms?
Yeah, we have worked with quite a few farmers for sure. Vermont has just recently, just this year, they've sort of scaled back the amount of solar that can go on agricultural soils, and they're really pushing the landfills and brownfields and compromised sites, which makes our job a little more interesting or harder or something. But no, we've done a lot of work with farmers over the last 5 or 6 years.
Any other questions? Okay. Jesse, I thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Sharing information with the residents as well as
Yeah.
the town board. We're gonna have another presentation. We're gonna take a couple minutes to allow them to set up, and we'll have a presentation by Calpine on wind power. Actually, it's a little bit ahead of schedule. Do you need another chair? You can pull another chair.
I'll slide one over.
Okay,
It's all right if I stand?
that's up to you, certainly.
I move around a lot.
We'll do our introductions again, and Jesse, I think I met with you probably about 2 years ago, in July.
Yeah, a year and a half. yeah.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess introductions again, Jesse,
Alec Jarvis.
or Alex Jarvis, and,
Greg Liberman. with
Okay.
EDR.
From EDR, yeah.
okay. And we did a round robin with the board already, and they're representing a company called Calpine, which has been, I'm gonna let you explain.
Yeah, yeah.
Bring the
I can-
board up to speed
I-
on what's been happening, and
Sure.
what we might be looking at happening in town.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us tonight. So I'm Alec Jarvis, I represent Calpine. We're an electric power generator. We have power plants throughout the United States. And I'll introduce Greg Lieberman from EDR. Greg's firm does a lot of visual work, permitting. They're actually assisting Calpine on a Broome County project called Bluestone. And I thought it'd be a good idea to have Greg here as well, if we have any questions, because we often get a lot of questions about the permitting process, studies involved for wind power projects. So I think what I'd like to do is just start at the beginning, how Calpine ended up in Guilford, and then talk a little bit about what we've done to date, and our thinking around the wind resource in Guilford, and then our future plans, and then open it up for questions because I know there's a lot of different facets about grid scale wind power, and I'd be happy to answer the individual questions. So my charge at Calpine is to develop new greenfield sites. So and what that means is a new project, not existing wind farm. So when we're taking a look at where a viable site might be, we've got to take a look at all kinds of different things. Primarily the wind resource. Then I'm going to look at the grid interconnection, because can I get my grid or get my power to market? I take a look at environmental factors. So that first phase is really mostly desktop. It is understanding are those factors there, and I haven't listed it's not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the key ones. So the wind resource, can I connect to the grid? And so that's where I start, right? And a lot of mapping and doing that process, airspace constraints analysis as well. And so as I do that process, I come to figure out, okay, here are some here are some options for where a wind farm might go. And then the next step is really starting to really understand, the local piece, right? What are the land use? What are some of those constraints after you've done your fatal flaw analysis? And that's sort of how it led us to Guilford. So we started to do those studies and said, all right, there's enough room on the grid for a grid scale project. We think the wind resource is viable, and I'll come back to that piece too. And that leads us to the next couple of steps in proving out the wind resource. And that's the most important piece. And so that's really from the introduction of the company and the project to an area. The next phase is talking to landowners. And so we started to do that, and the real focus was, all right, where we identify locations to test the wind, and we don't have to do it at every individual possible turbine location. You get a representative sample for an area that you're interested in. So we identified key landowners and locations and started to discussions with landowners. And currently we have a 60-meter NRG tower, and it's a guide tower. I think has everyone seen the Met Tower, meteorological tower? No? No? All right. It's on the Haynes property, so it's not too far from here. And there's also there at that site, there is this is a SODAR unit. This brand is a Triton. And what that does, it sits right next to this tower, and it measures the wind speed and direction via sound. So these two things complement one another, because we need to understand not only the wind speed and direction, but we need more data on how the machines are going to operate and what's the most appropriate machine for a site. So these two pieces, we gather a lot of data to understand the viability of the site and what's the appropriate turbine technology, because turbines are like vehicles, right? There's a lot of make and models suited for different wind regimes and wind resources. So we have that. We're measuring the wind speed, and we haven't done the next step is really, once we're confident in the wind resource, is really moving forward to all the other steps that are needed to have an operational wind farm. So you obviously, a big piece of that is the permitting, right? And the gathering of data that helps you understand how to optimize the site, both from a resource impact perspective. How do we minimize impacts? How do we build the shortest road? How do we have a layout that is the most productive and captures the most wind? And the permitting piece, you do all of these studies through a state level permit called, in this case, Article 10. I'll stop there if there's any questions, but that's one of the reasons I had Greg here today, because he's an expert in the Article 10 process. And I think it's important because that process really illustrates all of the studies and analysis that go into an eventual project. And a lot of the questions that I get really relate back to whether it's decommissioning of a project, or what bird studies are what impacts to bird species might there be, and how do you understand the baseline, or what's the ambient sound in a community, and then how does the state take a look at your project and sound and all of that. So I'll stop right there.
Can you just give us a short synopsis of Article 10? I'm familiar with it.
Sure.
Bob, you've done Article 10 for county planning. Just a little bit of information on what that is.
I will do my best to be brief.
Okay.
Article 10
I know,
itself
man.
is not. Article 10 was enacted in 2012. It is the regulations that govern electric generation north of 25 megawatts, including renewable projects, as Alec alluded to, like a wind project. It is intended to be a unified review and approval process overseen by the New York State Siting Board. Within the application, it covers a wide range of topics, including environmental justice, environmental impacts, environmental health. And just to give you some nuance, there are 41 exhibits that will comprise an Article 10 application. And these exhibits range everything from visual impacts, noise impacts, impacts to terrestrial ecology, birds and bats, public health, construction, land use, right down the list. So it is an exhaustive process by which support studies will be generated, environmental resources will be assessed, the impacts will be avoided and minimized and or mitigated, all contained within that application. To date, there's been one application filed with the state. That application has gone through completeness determinations and it's gone through hearings. So we're seeing within the Article 10 process an evolution. Some of you may be familiar with SEEKR. Well, SEEKR in and of itself is a pretty gray set of documents, but we have 30 years of case law in New York State. That kind of fills in the gaps. With Article 10, it's very new in that those gaps are starting to get filled in, and it's kind of an ever-evolving process. Very quickly, I'll just walk through the process in and of itself. There's a pre-application phase, which involves a public involvement program, lots of outreach, where somebody like Alec will, as the project gets to a critical mass, they'll submit a public involvement program to the DPS, to the New York State Department of Public Service, and then we'll implement a range of outreach measures, such as open houses, websites. And the goal is to solicit information and incorporate that information into a preliminary scoping statement. That preliminary scoping statement really defines what studies will be conducted and included in the Article 10 application. That goes through a stipulation process. There's lots of opportunity for public involvement, public engagement. For instance, the preliminary scoping statement has a public comment period attached to it. And then from that point, an application can be generated and filed, administrative hearings on the content of the information. The siting board will render a decision, and then ultimately it works through compliance and the issuance of a certificate. I think
You want to mention the interviewer?
that's all right. As it relates to the town board, I think there are kind of two key items. There's the intervenor funding aspect, which directly affects the host communities. And what that means is the applicant is required by Article 10 regulations to provide funding that can be dispersed to host communities or parties to a project to review studies, not necessarily to conduct parallel studies, but to have the engineer review a SWIP or something like that. Intervenor fundings requests will be sent out by the state following the issuance of a PIP, which kicks off the Article 10 process, and then again when the application is filed. So there are two opportunities to request intervenor fundings. And similarly, the other aspect that I think directly affects the town is that the host communities can nominate ad hoc members to the siting board. There will be 2 seats of the siting board that will be filled by local people that will be nominated by the host community. All of that happens once the PIP is filed. The state will send out notices kind of outlining all of those, and they kind of run in sequence, and the sequence is long. After from a PIP to a PSS, it's a minimum of 5 months mandated by Article 10. Similarly, once a PSS is filed, an application cannot be filed for at least 90 days. And from determination of completeness, the siting board has a year. So you're really looking at a 2 to 3 year process just within the timeframes listed in Article 10. And given how a lot of the agencies are functioning with the volume of information, it's not an expedited process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alan?
So as far as, I think one of the other things I'd mention, I would mention is sort of where we go from here or what our next steps are. And it's really dependent on the wind resource. There aren't a bunch of wind farms in Chenango County or Broome County, right? The technology in wind turbines has evolved over the past 5-10 years to really capture lower wind speed sites. And that's one of the reasons that we're here. And so we're proving that out, and we need 6 to 8 plus months of data because of it's a lower wind resource site. And once we have that, that comfort level, because of the process that Greg just talked about and the time that it takes and all of the studies that have to be done, we'll have more confidence in, okay, this is, we're going to move forward. And there'll be, as you mentioned in the first phase of permitting is really focused on outreach. So once a project starts to move forward, there's a lot of public comment, interaction with the company. Those studies start, bird biologists, bat biologists, all of that on the ground work will begin and then communication and meetings and updates with the town would happen. So we're at that point of still evaluating the wind data because we're at, where are we? March, I think we started to get, it was up and running and we're receiving data. So we're not quite to 6 months yet. But I envision, coming back, welcome to come back and, have individualized, meetings on different topics related to the development, turbine technology, the project company. So I'd be happy to open it up to individual questions and drill down to whatever you're interested in.
Start with the board.
If you decide that the data that you've collected looks like it's going to be viable, what kind of a project are we looking at size-wise?
Yeah, so I usually, we work, or most developments work backwards from the grid, right? We do our study to figure out what's the capacity in the lines. Because a grid scale project needs to have scale. And so our analysis is right around 100 megawatts, right? And so that's a 30 to 35 turbine project. Now, we haven't gone through the formal process with NYSO, where you start to much better understand what system upgrades you might need. but the initial analysis is about that size. So that's probably an appropriate number for with the information we have today. But it's also, again, dependent on landowners as well, right? Calpine owns no real estate in the town of Guilford, and so as part of that process, we need leases from landowners, and that's a big part of the development. That's a huge part of the development of the project as well, and ultimately how many turbines and who's interested, and how proximate you are to the local transmission lines.
What size are the turbines?
So for a site like this, where the technology is today, we're looking at between 2.75 megawatts to up to 4 megawatts. And the machines that we typically look at are, the manufacturers are GE, Siemens, and Vestas. Those are the big three for wind turbines. But that's the evolution. If you look at turbines from 10 years ago to today, the output is much larger, double
What's the
in
height?
cases.
I mean, I'm talking about like the height of the turbine.
Yeah,
the whole tower.
So that has also increased as well, and that's one of the reasons you get a higher output. Similar technology with the generator, but typically we have turbines with longer blades, right, and taller towers. So they're most of the turbines in New York that are vintage 5+ years ago are going to be under 500 feet, right? They're going to be on an 80-meter tower most likely. The one you see most in New York are a GE machine on an 80-meter tower with a 70-meter rotor diameter, 80-meter rotor diameter. And now we're seeing 100-meter towers with 100-meter rotor. So that goes 500 to 600 feet. The one positive about the increase in output is less turbines, right? But yeah, there's definitely been a trend in taller turbines and longer blades.
And Gilda, I have some materials that you're very welcome to take a look at. Our planning board chair and myself went to some training earlier this year, and as things are available, that's something I'll get out to the board. Generally they're open to different planning board trainings by New York State.
One thing I forgot to mention is, later in the evolution of the projects, there's road use agreements, right? There's a whole sort of process that projects have gone through with evaluation of roads that would be used, and once you know the layout, the condition of the roads pre-project and post-project, and the responsibility on the developer to upgrade and bring them back to the condition they were before. So that's a part of the process, as is decommissioning. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. Say you build this project, you have a project, say you put up 35 towers. I understand something about the passion ownership. So are you going to dump the emergency response on our local responders? Because that's highly specialized rescue training. And frankly, without a large stipend, they can't afford to do the training. I doubt if they have the qualified people to go 100 meters into a tower to help somebody out of a generator.
Yeah. So, across
I'm
the
familiar
board,
with, I only know this because I'm very familiar with Lowellville and the Tug Hill Plateau wind farm up there on both sides of it.
well, typically projects aren't taking that responsibility and shifting it to emergency response, because all of the folks that are on site have to have the high angle rescue certification. Do you have a different experience in Lowellville?
Yes, to a point. And I worked in the emergency response business, and they had issues in Martinsburg with getting enough people to provide that emergency service to the companies that were running the towers. Now, so my question pertains to who's going to be responsible when somebody's in a tower servicing it and something happens? That type of thing, because frankly, if you've got to wait for a specialized high rescue team, you could wait for half a day before you get somebody. I just want to throw that out.
Yeah, and in my experience, it's been the staff that are on site, but I can Yeah.
So
I can
you
get
pretty
more
much, so
detail. Yeah, I can-
you're telling me then,
No, I can get more.
they're gonna
information.
pretty much take care of any type thing like that themselves. They'll have people there when it happens.
Well, it depends what we're talking about, right? Is it fire, like, you know, from the fire or an actual issue that's happening with the personnel in the tower?
I saw a few fires up there, and I saw some veins that came off and went through pickup trucks, things like that. So I do have some backhand, which may not be accurate with you, I don't know. I can only tell you from
And
my
I can
experience.
just, putting it into context of the Article 10 process, there'll be an exhibit on public health and safety. And in support of that, there will have to be emergency action plans and site security plans
Okay.
that are, a requirement of Article 10 is that they are given to
Great.
New York State Homeland Security and the local providers.
Okay.
So, because I think every developer.
It'll be addressed,
You know,
okay.
it sounds like Alex's approach is that they would be managed by Calpine, but it maybe different developers have different approaches, so that would be something that would be flushed out.
Thank you, that's,
And it's as part of the permitting process, negotiated as well, right?
Yeah.
We submit, this is the emergency response plan, and then get comments back from the agencies on modifications. Other board questions?
Okay, once again, I'd like to open this to the floor, and if you can limit your comments and questions to about 5 minutes. John?
What's the typical spacing between the wind towers?
It's typically about 3 rotor diameters, right? So if we're talking about 100 meter rotor diameter, so we'd be 300 meters to the next one. It depends on elevation, right, and the intervening topography, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. But really you're looking for higher, you're following the ridges, right? And then it becomes a spacing in between along that ridge. Because they're, let's say in Kansas or Oklahoma where it's flat, it becomes, wake effect is what you're trying to avoid, right? And then it's sort of a two-pronged approach because of the different wind directions, and it's more rows upon rows. In this scenario, it's more, you're trying to be on the highest elevation, and that sort of drives the sort of the organic spacing between the turbines. But 3 rotor diameters is a good rule of thumb.
Okay, other questions?
Can you address what will make a viable project? You have one test site. What will get it to a viable? And then secondly, we're talking about vertical type instruments. Do I understand that the more progressive technology is horizontal? Can you address that as well?
Commercial scale, you don't see the vertical axis turbines, right? You see more of those in a residential setting. And I'm not an engineer, but I think it has to do with size, right? The actual, the difficulties around the engineering of a vertical axis turbine. And so what's more is typical, and you see across the U.S. and the world, are the 3 blades, right? Because that's the most that maximizes the wind production. And you asked about the viability. So for us to really understand, we'll need additional measurement locations, right? Because you really have about a 2.5 kilometer view with that individual tower. So we'll take a look at what data we're getting from that one, where's the optimal for another site, and it's fairly iterative because of your size of your project might move or be dependent on the grid. But typically you see more than 1 meteorological tower. Yeah.
So is there a maximum, like you're looking for 2 or 3 more?
It could, I think with 100 megawatts, 3 is probably the realistic number. 3 locations, right? Unless it's, very uniform site. Like, again, back to like the Oklahoma, Kansas scenario. In that scenario, it's same elevation everywhere, you can just do 1, right?
Another question, go ahead.
How loud are these things?
Good question.
Yeah.
So each turbine has its own rating, right? The manufacturer has to guarantee what the sound output is for that machine, right? And they're typically between 105 to 110 for the sound power output for the machine. And so what happens is, and that's up at the hub. And there's an industry standard and a protocol for how you measure sound. And so pivoting back to the Article 10, what we have to show is that here's our array, here are the turbine type that we're going to use, here's its rated sound output, here's where all the homes are and sensitive receptors, and then model that. And model it in worst case scenario so that they're on all the time, highest RPM, loudest output, and then we model what the perceived sound levels will be throughout the whole project. And that's a very big part of the permitting process and section of the Article 10 application that gets reviewed by it's DPS staff, correct?
Correct.
Right. On all of our assumptions, right? And on top of that, what we have to do, maybe it's more information you wanted, but we have to do ambient sound testing. So prior to this application getting filed, in the winter and the summer, we go out and measure what's the normal pre-turbine sound in multiple representative locations. And so that, and we're measuring wind speed and direction and all of that as well. So we can understand pre-condition and post. And that all gets into into the application that we file.
So what's the largest number of decibels you get for a resident under the scenario, under the Article 10?
I think I don't know that there's an explicit answer in that form of the question. The idea is that using the sound output of the turbine and assessing it versus the ambient conditions, there'll be an output that will be related to a standard, EPA standards, WHO standards, whether it's 45 dBA, whether it's 40 dBA at nighttime. It depends upon the receptor, whether it's a home, whether it's a school. There's different criteria for that. But to put it into context, in New York State, the New York State DEC has a policy on sound. And if the dBA increase, in order for there to be a perceptible sound difference, there has to be a 3 dBA increase. In order for it to be annoying, it has to exceed 6 dBA. And very, very rarely does that occur because of the allowable spacing that's available, the proximity, the distance that will be applied. In other words, the sound output from these is minimal, all things considered, that when you start to apply setbacks and distances to some of these receptors, that sound dissipates fairly quickly.
So what's a realistic setback? Quarter of a mile?
It's not in a distance format, rather in a variation of height. But so there isn't a real answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, as a sort of rule of thumb, we try to be 1,500 feet away as sort of a starting. But it depends on what the type of residence. But to your point, we're talking about all of the different factors with this sound study. And the location of all the dwellings. So I think you were looking for a set dBA limit, which some states have, right? They have, at nighttime, for Maine, for example.
50.
Yeah, it's 42, plus or minus uncertainty with the modeling, but if 45 dBA at night, right? There's a standard, right? And in New York, it's not the same. It's not the same.
No.
Higher or lower?
There isn't necessarily.
There isn't a cutoff.
There isn't a cutoff.
It's not.
Because
Yeah.
in Maine, people sue wind companies because of sound.
And so, not to further muddy this, but when you have a standard sound output from a turbine, the actual receptor, there's elevation differences, there's wind differences, so when these things are moving, it's already windy, and so there's ambient conditions and other factors that affect what that dBA is at that receptor. And it's not something where everyone is the same, every receptor is not the same, and that's all spelled out in what would be included in a noise impact assessment study. And just to get into a little bit of the weeds in Article 10, there'll be an entire stipulations process following the scoping statement and prior to an application that the Department of Health weighs in on, that the Department of Public Services weigh in on, and the noise piece is a primary component in terms of agreeing to assumptions, agreeing to methodology, agreeing to software that the modeling will be used, so that when that report is generated, and these are fairly sizable reports, it's all been vetted by all the parties, not vetted by all the parties that are privy to the stipulations process. So there is opportunity to nuance that language based on project, based on different ambient conditions that may or may not be present. So it is unfortunately a bit of a heavy topic.
Okay. Any other questions from the
So
floor?
what about the people who live here? Do they have any say in any of this? All I'm hearing are stipulations at the state level. Now, that can be good and that can be a nightmare.
Agreed. So the local involvement will start when a public involvement program plan is filed. And that program, that PIP, is what will outline how an applicant under Article 10, in this case Calpine for this project, would engage the town to present information. Now bear in mind, this is all a year prior to even filing an application. So the concerns can be voiced and incorporated into that preliminary scoping statement.
And
So
they are incorporated into it.
correct, because then there's a public comment period on the preliminary scoping statement. So
Because when I hear 30 to 35 of these turbines that have to be quite a distance apart and they're pretty darn big, that covers a lot of Guilford, I think, to me, but.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a percentage of the town, it's not the entire town, right? We look at, for a project this size, you know, we're for a big area and not the actual footprint of the project, but you know, if you draw a circle around it, you know, we're in the 8,000 acres, right? That's a guess right now,
Is
but
it your
so.
goal to get this to be a community involvement and community sharing?
No,
It is not.
We're a wholesale generator, right? Because of our, yeah.
Bob, you had a question?
For years, we've heard from our county planners that Guilford was not a likely site for a wind farm because our ridge lines are running the wrong way, running north and south rather than east and west. Has something changed to make that no longer true, or?
The hills moved around.
Was
No, it's the advancement of technology, right? I mean, an optimal scenario in the Northeast is a ridge line that is the same elevation for 12 miles, right? At high elevation, that's, you know, the predominant winds, you know, it depends on, there's a lot of variability, but it's from the northwest, right? In the Northeast, generally speaking. So that, you know, a ridgeline perpendicular to that predominant wind direction is ideal. Now, if you look at the arrays of projects throughout New York, you know, you're going to see, you know, not a defined ridgeline. You know, I've developed projects in Maine, and most of them are ridgeline projects, right? Individual turbines in rows. So, I think and I've heard this comment before about, you know, wind resource in a location 5 years ago, or you know, that wasn't viable. Well, that's really the sort of the theory we're testing out, and what's happened with the turbine technology is really because the blades are able to spin at lower wind speeds.
Anything else from the floor?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken, and then John.
You want to go first? Yeah, I was just wondering, this certainly impacts on the community, and what are the positives that might flow from it for the community? For example, will there be taxation benefits? Or, now you sell directly to the grid, so we can't be selling electric at a discount to people. So what are the benefits to the person, except for the landowner that is leasing you the property?
Yeah, that's to start with, that's one, right? The landowners that have turbines on their property or their infrastructure, there's lease payments for sure.
But their neighbors, that's what the neighbors
Yeah.
of those landowners.
Then the taxes is also a pretty big piece, given the valuation of each turbine and the size of these projects. So typically, projects in New York have negotiated pilot agreements with the local taxing jurisdiction.
Would be the town, the school, and the county.
So everyone sits at the table and negotiates that agreement.
How big is the investment, you said, the value of the project in
Yeah.
dollars?
So, you know, we're around $220 million is, you know, based on a 100 megawatt project.
And that's what we're looking at here.
If we were at the size I'm talking about, and really there's a lot of unknowns right now, right?
Sure.
And I started by saying we backed off the grid, you know, what the constraints are there, but that's a good figure. And then there is local employment. Now, You know, a wind farm is not like a supermarket or a sawmill, right? But there are, you know, 4 to 5 folks who run the farm this size. The manufacturer has about the same number of people as well. They typically come with a warranty. The owner of the project has a warranty with GE or Siemens, and those folks are responsible to maintain the turbines and make sure they're available. So their staff is on site as well. And then you have other, you know, snow plowing and site maintenance, that sort of thing, or other on the job front. And there's a lot of the pre-project and construction. There's a, you know, albeit short term, there's a lot of folks who go into building the roads, you know, tree clearing, foundations, engineering, all the substation work, all of that.
Now, you did mention the birds, so you're concerned about the birds, but what about the cows, for example? If they're in a pasture near one of these wind elements, does it make the cow unhappy, the noise, that it gives less milk or sour milk?
I'm not aware of any studies that show that. I don't pretend to be an agricultural expert either, but
I'm just wondering.
I'll remark that the wind farms in the Lowville area that run north and south along the Tug Hill, most of them are built on meadows and pastures. The cows don't even look up, they get used to it.
They're eating the grass.
There's usually a small safety zone around the base of the fence, and that's the end.
But it doesn't affect production or anything?
Not to my knowledge. Farmers love it, 'cause a lot of them work out other deals.
Okay, John?
Yeah, there's two-part question
Okay.
in regards to, is it right, does it fall under FERC, under any of the FERC regulations for the federal government?
because we don't, I mean, FERC is pipelines and electric lines that cross interstate borders, right? So we're not,
Okay.
other than reporting, right, our size of our project, but no FERC permits, if that was your question.
Okay, and then also too, is it subject to the smart growth law from New York State?
Smart growth law?
So, as part, yes, any state entity, state agency that is making a decision needs to be compliant with the smart growth infrastructure law. However, that applies more to pipelines, water, sewer, gas for sprawl and suburban development, and it's not necessarily compatible of a scale with this type of project, but yes, there will have to be an assessment of smart growth as part of this Article 10 review.
Okay. Yes, if there's nothing else, at this time, we're going to thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in. It's very much appreciated. And we're going to continue with our regular town board meeting. Everybody, of course, is welcome to stay.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
As soon as we make a little adjustment here, we'll be taking comments from the floor in about a minute. At this point in time, as I said, we're going to be moving to from the floor. We'll be following our public comment. Card number 1, please.
Number 1?
Yep.
Yeah. My name is Kenneth Fogarty. I'm from Gospel Hill Road. And somewhat related to what we heard tonight about the solar energy, I have cards here that are showing there will be a forum in Norwich called Solarize Shenango. I'd like to hand these cards out to the board.
Give them to Gail. We'll pass
I did 1, 2, 3, 4.
I have one.
You have 4. If that's not enough, I'll give more. And if I may also invite the public if they need any of these. The forum will be, it says, join Southern Tier Solar Works and Shenango Links, that's a local organization, to learn how residential, community, and commercial solar can save you money, help the environment, and boost the local economy. So this will be held Tuesday, October 17th in the Bohemian Moon in Norwich. The doors open at 5. The event starts at 5:30. There will be free refreshments, and those of you who have eaten at the Bohemian Moon know that that's a joy. They have wonderful food there. So I invite anybody who's interested. The main idea is to get a grasp of what does community solar mean versus commercial solar, and how do you buy into these projects if you're not going to put them on your own home, etc. So I invite anyone who's interested, take one of these cards. May I hand them out to the people?
Or just leave them on
I'll
the
leave
table.
them over here.
People can pick them up.
And if you're interested, grab one of these cards and we can learn more together. Thank you.
Okay, card number 2.
That's me, hi. My name is Margaret Herzog. I know the Guilford Highway Department covers 80 miles of road, and in the board meeting on May 10, 2017, you, Mr. Senek, said you wanted to tour the town roads. Did you happen to tour Hay Path Lane?
Yes, I've been there. Gilda, did you get up?
I didn't get a chance to.
I went up, I was up last week.
And what do you think? The roads,
It's in horrific shape.
it sure is. How come it wasn't done when Ives settlement was done?
I can't
I
answer
spoke
that.
to Bob today.
Okay.
Bob.
Our highway superintendent is on the fair board.
Yes, I
at the
spoke to
fair
Mr.
tonight.
Fleming.
And I'm not gonna make excuses for him, he's busy. And we addressed that, and he's supposed to get someone up there very shortly and get it patched. That's the best I can tell you. We addressed it today, and all I can tell you is they've been busy.
Because my neighbor said it hasn't been done in over 10 years.
Well, probably hasn't. They're doing
And
one
you do
now.
know that at the end of that road, the road ends at, it's an 85-year-old man who has a pacemaker, and the road's supposed to end at his driveway. He's almost fallen twice going down to get his mail. So I suggested, I said, well, nothing's going to be done, that he should file a complaint with the Agency for the Aged. Because this is ridiculous. Every road around us is done except for ours.
That's not true.
That's not true.
I've been driving around.
We've taken, I'm going to say, a lot of complaints, and I don't want to make excuses for this. I put in the board package tonight some information on oil, fuel costs. 2011 through 2014, there was a huge spike in the cost of, first of all, diesel, gasoline, but also impacts the oil that's used on the roads. And we had to significantly cut back on the amount of mileage that we could do because of that. Right now, I think we're 250, we were 379. So when your price goes up by a third, your maintenance...
It's an 800-yard road.
However, we're not actually 80, I think we're 63 or 64 miles of paved roads in the town. And we have a lot of roads that are not in good shape.
I live on one.
But you are correct, I've been up there, the road is in horrific
And it
condition.
was done, it looked like my neighbor who lives right beyond the golf course, she said it was done up to the golf course at one point and then never
Yeah,
done again.
never finished,
It was-
right.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll follow up on getting up there within the next couple of weeks, as we were told by the highway superintendent is going to do some work on
All
that.
I did, Bob and I had a conversation today, and I said, get somebody up there with at least a cold patch and pencil holes. He said, okay.
Yeah, because
And
when I
that's-
spoke
that's-
to him, I
that's,
said,
you
I'm
know-
driving on a path where
Yeah,
I get it, we get it, but it's the same thing.
Now, there's areas on the road where there's nothing left, you know.
That's
where-
me, yes, and the man at the end of the road.
Okay.
Mhm. Thank you.
Card number 3 from the floor.
I'll come over and look at it, I'd like to see it.
Mhm.
Okay, at this point in time, we're going to continue with our regular meeting. Okay, once again, I mentioned in your packets, I put the 2003 through 2017 information on costs. This was gasoline prices, but it really affected diesel we buy for the town. It affected all of our energy costs, and of course, it affected how much mileage we were able to pay. Where is my report here? There it is. Supervisor's report. What I'd like to do at this time is request a moment of silence in memory of Dennis Martin. Dennis Martin had served for many years as a justice in the town of Sydney. He then was justice in the town of Guilford. More recently, he is a member of a board assessment review and has served on the Economic Development Committee, and he passed away last week. So I'd ask everyone for a moment of silence in his memory. I'd like to thank you. At this point in time, I think Gail may have some information on there are no immediate services. There's something scheduled, was for September.
16th.
Yeah, I was gonna say mid-September.
And we'll get that information out to the board members.
It's online.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to ask the board, I've asked previously, this was actually on my supervisory report last month, I need some dates for a work session to discuss proposals for the Teamster contract. I haven't gotten much feedback. We need to get some dates together. They have met with their union rep, and I also would like a date. Roberta asked me for when are we going to meet. My goal is to try to finish this before we do our budget, so I'll know what actual figures we
Did we
have.
get any figures from
We haven't met yet.
insurance?
I have the insurance that should be in your packets tonight. They did not get that to us. I went and called them directly, and I also had figured the increase from 2017, and we'll talk about that in executive session. But do we have open dates? I think we need to meet at least probably for an hour as a board, and no one has emailed me anything as far as changes or ideas for negotiations.
Pick a date.
You want something this month, George? Is that what you're trying to-
Definitely this month. Is there nights during the week that are better? There's court here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we can always use our other room. Do we want to look at next Tuesday, the 15th? 6:30, 7 o'clock?
Next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
There's no court here, you said?
There is court here, but we'll use the office.
Okay.
Do you want to say 7 o'clock?
7's good for me.
Okay. So we're going to meet, and then what we'll do at that time, we'll pick a date for when we're going to meet with them.
Yep.
If you can't be here, I'm going to say, try to send us an email. I'll inform Roberta that we're meeting at that time, and I'll be back in touch with her after next Tuesday.
August 15th at 7 p.m.
7 p.m. here.
Okay.
To update you on our Guilford water project, I've forwarded the USDA paperwork to fiscal advisors in Syracuse. We have the agreement with them for fiscal advising. I've also sent it to New York State Environmental Facilities Corp. And to bond counsel. I forwarded the local attorney's legal service agreement to Portland USDA, and they kicked it back. They said, well, you need to have this in compliance with Form E. I've gone through everything. I don't have Form E. I've called them and notified that the second time it's happened. Steve went through everything, and every entity we're dealing with has the same set of paperwork. I called Brendan today. He said, well, he has Form E because the application they're doing is online, so he's going to get me that information. All it was an amount, so we have to put it, and hopefully we'll move forward. In that regard, too, I've discussed the final lease agreement with Steve Matoli. It was tweaked the third time. He said it's ready to sign, and I talked to Pat, so we should be doing that next week, and I'll be forwarding that to USDA and EFC and to Lamont Engineering. I sent out the modified board and hose agreement to everybody. You should have gotten that by email. We'll talk about that later in the executive session. Just for an FYI, the Camp Missouri Charity Run is this Sunday, August 13th from 5 to 6 p.m. I have heard back from the Sheriff's Department. They usually provide some traffic control, and we'll have a patrol car in the area. On August 14th, coming up next Monday, the Shenango County Shared Services Panel will vote on the proposed plan. I did send that out electronically to people, and Guilford had a copy. Any objections to the plan must be done in writing. I have to do a written response. Why would I vote yes or why would I vote no? And it can be on particular items within the plan. I believe that's at 11:30. The vote will be in the Board of Supervisors room in the county office building.
What's the date?
August 14th. It's after the regular board meeting. There will be a drug take-back day on August 23rd, 2017 from 10 to noon at the Versailles Town Hall. I have the flyer, which I'll put on the bulletin board. These things are being done through the Sheriff's Department, and they're supposed to be doing one here sometime later this year. Received the 2016 Commerce Shenango Annual Report. They generally provide development services for the county. The county contracts with them for that if anybody would like to see that. Referred a request by Kathy Dawson to change the no parking restrictions on Nicholson Street to the Highway Committee. I'm just going to let you address it, I guess, when you do your report. And I contacted the legal firm of Gerhardt and Coughlin to discuss legal services, and I'll share that with you in executive session. And that's it for my report. Moving on, Town Clerk Gail.
Hunting licenses went on sale last week. Last week was a disaster. There was nothing but problems.
With the computer system again.
So far this week has been okay. We've had a couple of meetings with Civic Live, and we are at the point now where we are working to design how we would like the web to be laid out and set up and everything. And then we'll be getting back with Andrew, our contact person. I sent out about 2 or 3 weeks ago delinquent dog license notices. I went through the report, and there were a lot of delinquent licenses. I'm getting a very good response. And in September, Bob's going to go out and start doing follow-up to the ones I haven't heard from, looking at the roads that never had a census done on them and finishing all of that up. But there have been a lot of dogs that have died.
Well, in actuality, some of it's true. I don't know whether people realize that if their dog is deceased, it's beneficial to call the town clerk because we pull it out of the system.
So that the notices, then it, you know, have an accurate database.
Is there a statement stating that on the notices when they go out? If your dog has passed, to report it?
Yes, there is, because there's a box that you check if you've moved, if you've given your dog to another owner, if the dog is deceased, and they're supposed to check
And send it
if
back.
one of those is
There you go.
applicable. And then there's a place for them to sign and date it, and
Yeah.
I would update the computer. And we are planning to close the office on September 1st, which is a Friday for a holiday, Labor Day holiday weekend.
Okay, is that it?
I believe that's it.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Moving down, financials. You do have your June financials, and the July ones, which I realized went out more recently. I think Gail emailed that the bank had some issues, and Janice put a lot of extra time in trying to work backwards from them. My report really is based on July, my updates. I did the most recent one. Financial reports, if you look at your July, just to update you, page 4, we received $99,448.27 in sales tax. To date for this year, it's 4% more than we received in 2016. If it holds true, you know, we've been one of the counties that our sales tax is up, which is a good sign. The estimate by the county treasurer that even if things taper off, we should see a 2% increase still by the end of the year. For us, we're looking at probably about $8,000, which is a fair amount of money. We haven't seen any increase in sales tax for the last 2 years. Parking lot paving, I don't know if Bob talked to anyone else. I think the figure he gave me was $6,400 to do the work ourselves in the parking lot to repave this. That comes out, that's not highway, that comes out of building money, so I'm going to have to do a budget amendment because we don't have enough in that line. It either can come out of contingency or out of building reserve. But we'll take a look at that next month, and Guild, if you have a preference, and Barb, let me know what you think we should do. Page 6, highway sales tax distribution. Once again, we received a good amount of sales tax. If you're in July, we have actually already exceeded our budgeted amount for the year. So there's an extra $5,268 in sales tax money that is in the highway fund, and that's where that has to remain. Generally, we have passed a resolution in October for the third quarter saying that once the highway revenue line is met, the balance goes to the general fund. But we've already met it, so later we'll be looking at a resolution to continue that. But there is an extra, as I said, $5,268 already in the highway fund. I'm going to make a recommendation that we place $40,000, which is money from unassigned fund balance that we always budget for bridges that we haven't spent, and we put that in our capital reserve. Usually we do that at the end of the year. I was waiting this year because we were looking at doing that box culvert, which is now not gonna happen, and I really wanna protect that larger chunk of money. They got too busy, and so we're not doing the box culvert on School Street this year. And that money was set up for bigger projects. Page 11, which is Guilford Water. We have, if you look down the page, we have the money, the preliminary engineering grant money that was returned to the town, $15,000. I'm going to talk to Janice. I've spoken with her before, but we haven't decided what to do, but to set up a capital projects expenditure line. We do have some small bills coming in which we can still handle, but we do have the $15,000 that we'll reimburse for money that we already spent. Questions on the financials, either from June or July?
Just a quick thing, George, and you probably can tell me, is town highway staying in line within the percentage you're supposed to be in?
Yes. We're close within the payroll line, but we had that one payout earlier.
I'm not so concerned with the payroll line as I am with.
Right.
The,
to my knowledge, at this point in time, we are on budget.
Right.
And I have not met with Bob. Usually we do that, we'll be pretty quick in August and spend that, but he spends it down and then I do the same thing and we compare.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no questions at this point in time, I'd ask the board what they want to do with June financials.
Step into the red.
Okay, a motion has been made by Councilman Miles, seconded by Councilmember Odell to approve them as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, that's going to carry. My recommendation or expectations, we're probably going to table July so you get a chance to look at them more thoroughly. You've only had them for a day and a half.
Movie table July.
Okay, a motion has been made by Councilman Ives to table July's financials. Do I hear a second? Seconded by Councilmember Ward. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's going to carry. I did not get this put in your packet because I didn't do this till at the afternoon. There's one proposed budget amendment. I'll pass these around. We had the air conditioning installed, and there were some purchases of some materials from Staples, and that comes to the amount of $3,901.75. That's being funded out of the Justice Court grant that we received of $4,100. And basically, the budget amendment is to increase the appropriation line A1110.2 Justice Equipment, and from the revenue line, State Aid Justice Court grant. Just simply taking the grant money and putting it into the appropriation line in the budget. Okay, motion's been made by Councilmember Odell. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Seconded by Councilmember Ward. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, that's going to carry. Okay, moving down to committee reports. Highway Committee.
Guess we didn't.
We didn't formally meet, but we both talked about it. Let's put it that way.
Yep. Go ahead, Tony.
Well, he stopped, we chatted today. He told me he'd finished the grinding on Junction Road, from Schaefer Road to the top of Junction. He said he'd added number 2 crushed stone and run for the base, this is, he's done this stuff. He's done the bad, he's fixed most of the bad spots on Blower Road, I can attest to that. He changed a big pipe, and and that's why he's waiting to see if we have money to grind the road. I don't know where that's gonna go, that's why I asked about the highway budget.
Okay. Bob, did he give you the figure of $90,000?
Nah, we didn't get that far.
Well,
He knows how I feel about going over
He
budget
gave me
on
that
that stuff.
figure, and as I said, we're going to have to take a close look at that. I personally do not think we have the money.
Right, I know when I talked to him, he was gonna
Yeah, he thought it was
look
going to
at
be
it
60, and we got
and
the
see where we
estimates.
were down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So he never threw that number at me.
Okay.
Said he had a FEMA meeting, and it looks like we're gonna get back most of our extra cost for the extra snow plowing and for the storm in March.
And breakdowns, we did experience some breakdowns in equipment that time.
That's kind of all we have. I know that I asked him, both trucks are now ordered on time, and that's about all there is to say. I guess things are going fine.
Okay, we've been very busy this summer, and until recently, we were shorthanded. We were down one highway member who's now back to work, and I think it's been a very busy summer for our highway crew. Okay, and once again, I'd encourage,
And one more thing I'll add, George, and we did talk about the roads that got to be done, and your road, Haypath Lane, did come up, and we did speak, and I reinforced the issue to get up there and at least get the holes patched in it so you can drive up and down. So I can't tell you it's going to come tomorrow or next week, but it was discussed, so I know what kind of
well, and the other piece on this, I really am going to encourage the town board, we need to do a road tour at some point in time, and take our notebooks along with us and stuff, because some of our roads are in really bad shape, and we're actually doing a lot of work on them. We're probably going to spend $68,000 just on road maintenance and repair this year. And as I said, what hurt us, and I can give you that document, was the fact that for a period of time there, that fuel prices went up so much. It meant that about a third of what we generally would be doing did not happen, and that was for a 4-year period. Okay. Moving down, building committee.
Yes, we met on July 29th, and we have been working, I have been working with George and Gail on the committee with Civic Live for our new website, and we've had 2 kickoff meetings with our website design team head, and we're working on choosing a template that we can agree on, that we think will work the best for our town. And there's some very nice ones, so I think it'll be really nice when we get it done. George had asked about a possible portable air conditioner for the town office, and I did do some research on Consumers Reports and gave him a suggestion.
And they are available.
And they are still available.
Yeah.
It was a very good price. It was up, what was it, a couple $100.
Actually, I
below.
remeasured, and I really would recommend the 14,000 BTU.
Oh, okay, you think it was
And
better.
some of them, despite the fact that they're 10, 12, or I should say 12 or 14, they're supposed to cool sometimes slightly different areas by 50
Right.
square feet. And it was a little bit more money, but it was still the
Okay.
same company, and
Was it on sale? 'Cause
yeah, it was on sale.
It was on sale, okay.
It's a good
Let's
time
get
to
to
buy
that
one.
time, yeah, that time of year when, if they're still available, they're on sale. I know that George already mentioned about paving the driveway. I talked to Bob about this the other day. He said he will be doing a resurfacing between, he was talking about 1.5 inches, but I believe he said 2 before. But it's in that vicinity anyway. Bainbridge Town Highway is gonna help with the paver and the roller. And he told me he was looking at later August or September. He told me he was gonna check on oil prices. I just saw these figures today. So this is up a little bit from originally what he was talking about. Originally he was talking about 5 to 6, and this is more than that. But hopefully we'll be able to get that done. Do you want Barb and I to meet with him on this, or how do you want us to handle that?
I don't know, I think it's all set.
Just
As far as I know, Bainbridge is gonna bring their paver over, we're gonna share the work, and it's just a matter of paying for it, and where's the money come from?
Right.
And we have the money put aside, but it's,
Yeah, getting it done. Okay, the town hall building, Bob's gonna have the summer helper do that tomorrow, I understand. A power wash of the town hall building. We finally have the power wash that they can use it. And then the front door needs rust proofing and painting, and he'll have the summer helper do that too.
if he has time, he's got,
He's down there.
to the 17th, he'll be here, which
Ooh,
is,
we'll have to really push him.
yeah.
Well, I hear he's working out well, so
Yeah,
that's it.
doing a good job.
Also, Bob mentioned, and I saw the list of the extra equipment, I see there's some things that didn't get.
Well, that's in our, we'll get to
Okay, so
that.
we'll deal with that. We might want to think about what we're going to do with that area. Okay, that's all I have. Unless Barb, do you have something to add to that?
No?
Okay, planning,
That's it, thank you.
Bob,
And no subdivisions.
no subdivision, okay, moving down, old business. Guilford Water, I kind of updated you on that already. The process, it's just amazing. You're dealing with the state and federal entities. I call the State Environmental Facilities Corp. and I talked to the representative there. And they said they have to talk to USDA. I said, I'll give you the contact, I'll give you their extension. Well, I know somebody else there. Then they said they hadn't received our paperwork, and then they told me we're confused with another town. And then they found some of the paperwork, and I said, Gail and I sent you this, this, and this. Well, maybe somebody else in our office has it. So we're following up, sending it again, and that's about where we're at. I said, hopefully, we will be moving along pretty quickly on this now. We need to set a date for the public hearing on the board and host contract. Last month, we looked, I believe, at September 11th.
Yeah, that's right.
And I would suggest we continue to look at, it's a Monday, I believe, September 11th.
That will be there.
And it will be over at Board and Hose. What has to happen before that?
No,
No? Can't do the 11th.
I'm fairly certain I'm not even gonna be in town, or I can't promise I'm gonna be back in town.
I'd like to get this done in September, so the 11th doesn't work.
Do it
I don't
on-
know what their schedule is. We were trying to, what day do they meet?
They would be the.
That would be the 11th.
Yeah,
Second
the
Monday of the.
11th.
I don't
Usually
care if we do it on
first.
your meeting date or not.
Well, yeah, I just, yeah. So,
Do it on the 18th.
okay, the 18th? And I'll notify Jean. It's a Monday. At 7 o'clock
At Board and Hose.
at Board and
Well,
Hose.
I have to go to Manhattan on the 11th, that's why.
Okay,
The 18th at what time?
7 o'clock.
At least I hope
And
that's-
what we have to do at our end, I'm looking at Gail, is we just have to update the contract and make sure it's available for public inspection. Okay? We will do the legal notice. I will notify the supervisors from the other towns. Okay, fuel bid resolution, or set a date for budget workshop. We've done that already. No, wait a second, I'm in the wrong. Surplus, goods bids,
Are we doing that here or there?
there. At least that's what we've always done. We've always done the public hearing there.
Are you talking about the firehouse?
Firehouse.
Yeah.
Yep. In your packets should be a spreadsheet on the bids that Gail put together. And she's highlighted the high bids. Gail was right, there are a couple items that nobody bid on. They tended to be our outdated electronics. My recommendation on those is, since we've already declared surplus and there were no takers, is that they are recycled. That we send them out for recycling. We don't want to just kind of keep them around here. The net on this is a little bit over $2,000, $2,635.75. I'm gonna have to go through with Bob on this, items that were directly highway items. That money is gonna go to the highway, and other items that will go back to the general fund. There's a couple things like mowers and things, they're general fund items, so the highway does the mowing.
Do you want to discuss the air compressor issue?
Yep. We had 2 bids on the air compressor, both by the same person. And one was $100 higher than the other bid. I don't know whether he came back in the second day and
Air compressor, not compressor. Number 7?
number 7. Generally speaking, we take high bid.
There you go.
Yes?
He wanted to bid against himself, I guess this is right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, if somebody else had
It
bid higher than
Almost
that.
seems like a clerical error, doesn't it? Like maybe.
I think it was supposed to be 50.
No, it was a
You
whole
have
set.
2 separate pieces of paper
Two
with the
separate.
exact same description written out,
Yeah.
exact same number
I wonder
written
what he was
out.
thinking, that's crazy.
I have no idea.
Sold.
Okay, what's the board's pleasure to do with the bids? Accept the bids?
Yeah.
Okay, there's been a motion to accept all high bids for our surplus goods. Do I hear a second?
So,
Okay, Barb, you did.
yeah, whatever.
You got that?
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's gonna carry. We'll let the winner is no, and they can come in and pay us. And I'll get a hold of Bob next week and we'll go through them. Okay, new business, contract negotiations. We've set a date for our workshop. Need to set a date for a budget workshop. Say early September or mid-September.
Don't we usually do it in August?
We have done them in August before.
Yeah. Just wondering
I don't know if we're gonna have everything. Do you think we'll have stuff put together?
I've got all the forms set up, I can
Okay.
send them out.
Okay, we can do August. The sooner we get this done, I'd say the better, because if we have to make any adjustments in it, that gives us time to make adjustments. Or we haven't had anomalies, but if we do, we'll be able to decide what we're gonna do with them.
And then do we want to have everybody come in or give them the choice to come in?
You know, one of the things that I have struggled with, and I mean, it has been a struggle, is that when we do these budgets that come in from different departments, they're told that if you have anything out of the ordinary typical business, you need to put it in your budget, and that is not happening. I sent a memo out and remind people, you know, we did the tank cleanings for the water departments, we had tree removal for some of those things. You know, we had last year, we had the new mower that we were buying, and we didn't have good prices on that. You know, when I put the budget together, I need to have that information. You know, we've been able to cover things, we've been fine, but people have to realize that if you're not budgeting something, and sometimes these are things we have to do, particularly with water departments, testing and so forth, that we need that information. But on there, we could put, if they don't plan on coming in, they need to give us their budget sheets and or meet with me so I can share that information with you. Okay, is there any time in August that looks like an opportunity for when you would be able to meet? And I'm assuming we're going to do evenings again? 7 o'clock?
What about the week of the 21st? Would that be too early? Would that seem to work?
That's going to be tight.
Is that what you mean?
We're on the 15th.
I'm not gonna be available, I don't think.
At all that week?
I'm gonna take a vacation sometime this year.
Okay.
Or do something.
So for the rest of August?
If you can do it before, I'd like to leave the last week of August open in case we want to do something.
So why don't we look at the week of the 21st? Want to make it any day that week in the evening, I guess. Do you have a
That
preference?
gives people, what, 1 week?
1 week to get their budget together.
Does that be enough time?
The stuff,
That's pretty tight.
that's making it pretty
That's
tight.
pretty tight.
Why don't we look at September then?
Oh, then you get Labor Day.
Yep. Mike, you're going to be gone that, what about the
I should be gone the
September 7th
11th.
or 8th?
I'm supposed to be gone the 11th, and I'm not available Tuesdays, Fridays, the rest of the week.
Okay, can we look at Thursday, September 7th?
Sure.
And once again, we'll probably use the office.
What
7
time?
o'clock,
7?
budget workshop.
September 11th?
7th,
7th.
at 7 o'clock.
7th at 7.
Yep. Okay, very good, thank you. Fuel bid resolution. We have to put our fuel out to bid. Do you want me to read this, Gail? Okay, this Town of Guilford legal notice, diesel fuel, propane, kerosene, and fuel oil pursuant to section 103 of general municipal law. Notice is hereby given that sealed written bids will be received by the town clerk and presented to the Guilford Town Board for 20,000 gallons of diesel fuel, more or less, for propane and for kerosene for the period beginning October 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2018. Fuel to be delivered to the Town of Guilford Highway Department at the Guilford Center, New York, and the Mount Upton Water Buildings. All bids must be accompanied with a non-collusive certificate signed by the bidder and will be open September 12th at 5 p.m. Town Board reserves the right to accept or reject any or all bids. Entertain a motion to put our fuel out to bid. Moved by Councilman Miles, seconded by Councilman Ayers. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's going to carry. Facility use agreement. Is that in your packets? Or
No, I didn't.
Okay, we have had a request by the Shenango County Democratic Committee to hold the County Guilford Democratic Caucus at the Town Hall at 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday, August 30th at 2017.
Move we approve.
Motion to approve the application for facility use. Do I hear a second? Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, that's going to carry. Dale, will you get that back? I just put this on here, county shared services proposal. Is there any feedback that the board wants to give me?
I had some concerns.
Okay, go ahead.
Because first of all, the way it's worded, I mean, they're listing a whole bunch of stuff in there, and then they say that it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
It would be too expensive, so are we still approving of that?
Yes.
That's what I don't understand.
Well,
That should just be
Political.
taken off.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics. Right now, it's being questioned as to whether or not it's even legal that the governor, this is a directive from the governor's office, so there's a challenge to that.
Right,
You know, we have some hoops to jump through. There was a very short timeline on this.
yeah.
There were suggestions by the governor's, the State Department on how we could save money. A number of those things are already being done around here, and basically it's to take money off the tax levy. One of the suggestions is that we disband our lighting districts. Well, then individual people living within the lighting district are going to get a bill,
Yeah.
but it's going to lower their tax bill. Another one that may be viable is to increase the amount of shared services between our highway departments. That may be viable, to go to county-wide tax assessment. It looks like there won't be a savings until 2030 with that.
Maybe.
Maybe.
And then we don't know that.
And then we don't know. You know, and there's other issues with that, of course. You know, I raised the concern, yeah, if we go to countywide tax assessment, where in the county office building we're going to house those people? Then you're going to have your residents drive to Norwich from around the county to meet with the assessment.
Well, they marked that pretty much no. on
Yeah, I
that.
know.
But it's still there.
Yeah, that's the
But that was a
problem. But they're
big
letting you know.
thing that the state was touting as a way that we could save taxpayers money.
But the elephant in the room, they're completely ignoring. And that's
That's
the
right.
Medicaid
State-
that
well,
the
and state-
county has to
sure,
pay for,
and-
where all other states do it on the state level.
I know, and but, you know, dealing, I'm going to say with state mandates, but we have to put this plan together. The viability of most of the things in the plan, they're not going to save money, but we have to have a plan. There are some things that could happen. You know, some of the other supervisors I've talked to said they're justice courts because they're such small towns and you got to maintain computers and programs and you have to have the justices cost their towns a lot of money. Thus far, that has not been our situation at all. However, for town courts to combine, you have to get legislative approval.
To the tune of $500,000 a year more they're talking?
Well, that was to simply have the Office of Court Administration take over all the local courts.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
and that's just a guesstimate, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
So you start talking $500,000 to do the job that's getting done right now.
Sure. And there's no local control over the job. You're not going to have any local representation. But the other aspect of that, some towns probably could combine their courts and save some money.
Well,
Well, there's a shared service.
I know. However, in order for that to happen, the legislature would have to pass a law allowing them to do it. Because currently, town courts cannot be combined. So the proposal is to have the state take over the whole system. And as you can see there, that's going to cost a small fortune. And it's not a viable idea.
the whole thing.
It's
my-
politics.
My own opinion is that it's a move, it's a political statement, consolidate, and I went through this with New York State Fire too. Consolidate services, move it to a higher level, and then the locals have absolutely no input into what's gonna happen.
That's for sure.
And it's a bad, bad move.
I've never seen anything
Period.
consolidated yet to save money.
And if you want to take a
They've
look
been
at,
doing it for the last 10
Sure.
years, trying to, at different levels.
and if you want to compare the county finances, which Shenango County is in I'm going to say, stable, solid financial shape, based on where the state is at and where some of our neighbors are. And we've been criticized in a lot of ways, but, you know, we don't have debt. We do have a reasonable surplus and reserve, which serves a valuable purpose that we can make our payroll payments January, February, March without borrowing money. Other counties have to borrow money to simply pay their bills and make payroll, which when you borrow, you're paying a lot of interest on those things. And I think it was a good move that the county has that called a surplus, that they can finance their own operations until tax dollars come into the county the following year.
So what does the county want from us? They want us to sign? Do they want us to agree? What do they want?
Well,
from
my
us?
position on this is, I'm gonna say, yes, we agree to this plan, and we don't find any of the suggestions the state has as viable.
I would go for that, but
Yeah.
I'm really opposed to almost everything on the plan. It doesn't
Sure.
make any sense.
It
for us.
doesn't make any sense.
You got this whole thing with
And it's
the
the vagueness
sheriff
is really a
and the
problem.
police department, it says it
Yeah.
might,
It
it
might.
needs more examination. Well, I'm not voting on something that needs more examination.
Well, actually, the
That's
judge thinks over $1 million more a
Yeah.
year.
It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm gonna say, yes, I'll vote for something that needs more examination. We were given a short time frame. This came out at the end of April, and by September, something's gotta be in place.
We looked at it, that should sound off something, because the state says try and do something, well, obviously, they're trying to do something, just because they don't agree with it, doesn't mean they're
Well,
not
and-
doing anything.
And I went for the
Did
training
something,
sessions
but
on
there's-
this.
Look, you-
Virtually, it was, I'll tell you, I got notification on Tuesday that the training session was the following Monday in Binghamton.
Yeah, that's how the state does things.
And when we went, the things that they're suggesting, Chenango County or towns within the county, we're already doing them.
As I said, we're ahead of Como, I guess.
Yes, we are.
That didn't
Okay,
take a lot, but we're ahead of it.
okay, once again, from the floor. Does anyone else have comments from the floor? And I guess at this point in time, I would entertain an executive session to, a motion to go into executive session to discuss a contract
So moved.
with the town and legal services that I have been in contact with.
So moved.
I do not expect any other action to be taken by the board tonight. I'm going to thank people for coming. Okay, motion's been made to go into executive session, and seconded. Any discussion?
Second?
If not, all in favor?
Time.